Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Google Fiber, Sparking a Renaissance in Fixed Access. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'm hosting today's webinar. Google Fiber has become more than just a network. It has become a movement and model for the future of Internet access. It is no longer just viewed as a lab experiment. It is touching off a renaissance in fixed access across the U.S., one that will reshape the broadband footprint in the U.S. in coming years. Google's unique business model and go-to-market approach for Google Fiber is highly disruptive and will upend the status quo of charging high fees for relatively substandard levels of Internet service, a model that incumbents have enjoyed for many years. Today, Senior Analyst Chris Antlitz will share his perspective on Google's business model and provide additional insight into how its Google Fiber initiative is setting in motion a wave of investment in the fiber infrastructure across the U.S. Before Chris begins, there are a few logistics I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Chris will address them at the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to Chris or myself at the end of the presentation to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. And we'll share all the social media contacts with you at the end of the presentation. Now let me introduce Chris Antlitz, Senior Analyst on the Networking Mobility team here at TBR. Chris has been covering the telecom market for the past 6 years and guides the research on telecom vendors. His insight into the telecom market, business models and vendors, and operator strategies have helped our clients improve their strategic go-to-market plans and overall performance. And with that, let me hand this over to Chris.
Thanks, Allison. Welcome, everyone. Picture a nuclear reaction. Imagine for a second 2 particles colliding and setting off a chain reaction that spreads, gets bigger and bigger with immense energy and vibrancy. In many ways, this metaphor applies to what Google's doing with its fiber initiative, which is to set off a chain reaction in the fixed broadband market. That's the theme of what we're going to be talking about today, because Google, through its Google Fiber initiative, is setting in motion a renaissance in fixed broadband deployment across the United States. So let's begin. What is Google Fiber? So Google Fiber is an initiative at Google centered on providing fiber to the premises Internet service to the masses at affordable rates. This initiative was announced in March of 2011, and it has since grown into a nationwide phenomenon, if you will. It's been the talk of many cocktail parties, and it is generating a substantial amount of buzz across the country. So I have some images here just to give some visual of what this is all about in layman's terms. So Google has their own fleet of trucks. They have their own team of engineers, and they are essentially, in these pictures, going out and actually laying fiber cabling in residential markets within some major cities, and setting up, if you see there on the bottom right-hand side is the fiber jack. That's the access point that Google's using to provide access to HD television and Internet service to the household. Now, Google Fiber is currently residential focused. There is access for SMB as well if they are in an area that is heavily residential. And in the future, Google may consider deploying more of these lines for more of a business focus, but as of right now, it's more consumer-oriented. So where is Google Fiber deployed? So on this map here, the green dots are markets that it's currently in. So in 2011, the initiative was announced, and Kansas City was selected as the first market to receive the network. So Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri started receiving service in 2012. That's when they started deploying the lines and they had to do all the prep work in late 2011. They started deploying the network in 2012. Then in 2013, it was announced that Provo, Utah would get service. And then this year, they started deploying the fiber network in Austin, Texas. So 3 markets currently under construction. And then in 2014, they announced that up to 9 additional metro areas will potentially receive service. And that's what the red markers are on this chart. So this is very interesting because Google started with a few markets, their test markets, if you will, and now all of a sudden they're coming out and saying, all right, we're going to do this on a much bigger scale, and we're going to look at doing this across up to 12 metro areas. It's an indicator that this initiative is moving from the test and pilot phase to the mass build-out phase, and that the company is serious about becoming a major internet service provider. And this has major implications for incumbent ISPs because of the disruptive business model that Google is employing. Now, just want to note for a second, if Google deploys fiber and covers all of these metro areas, it only represents 3% of the US population. So it's not very much, but it's all it takes for the reaction to start, to be set in motion. It's already happened. So we're in the very early innings of this renaissance, we're calling it, in fixed access deployment across the United States. And this initiative that Google has set off is the catalyst for this acceleration in fiber deployment across the country. So let's talk a little bit about what is Google Fiber's strategy and their business model. This is quite interesting. So why are they in the fiber business? So they don't want to be a traditional ISP provider. They don't want to be profiting off of the access. Yeah, it would be great if they could, but that's not why they're doing this. They're doing it because it indirectly drives their online advertising business. Now, around 95% of Google's revenue and profits come from selling online advertisements, and the operating margins on that business are around 30% consistently, and it's growing very quickly. So what does the fiber have to do with driving that business? Well, it's an indirect relationship, because if you can provide faster internet service to your end users, they can do faster downloads, they can cycle through internet pages much faster. And if they're able to do that, Google's able to sell more advertisements because their advertisements are getting cycled through and seen more frequently in the same time frame. So this has a huge positive impact on how many times they can have ad impressions take place and indirectly driving those ad dollars. The second big reason that they're doing this is because it builds customer loyalty from the value offering. So Google is involved in a variety of initiatives right now. Mobile initiatives with their Android platform. They have the Google Docs initiative, Chromebook, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then they have the Google Fiber. So all of these offerings that they have in the marketplace, if they are providing a huge value to the end users, they're more likely to use more of their offerings, and that is also indirectly driving ad revenue. So this is very much about driving ad dollars. So then let's look at the business model around this. How are they able to provide a better offering than incumbent ISPs? Let me just take a step back for a second and say, we believe that Google is operating the access business on a break-even basis. So right there, they're able to provide offer these services at a lower price point than incumbents who are trying to generate a profit off of this. There's a few other ways that Google's is able to do this on a break-even basis. I call it win the people, win the city model. So essentially what this means is that before Google makes a determination of what city it will commit to, they try to win the people over. And it's not really that hard, because if you're coming into a city and saying, hey, what do you guys think about getting 1 gigabit internet service at a price point that is a fraction of the cost of what your current ISP is providing, most people are going to say, yes, I want that really bad. And that's been the response that they've been getting when they go to market with this and start soliciting cities. It also helps Google determine if they can get enough people to commit to make the build-out economically viable. Because remember, building out a fiber network, or any fixed network for that matter, is extremely expensive. There's huge CapEx costs that are involved, and there's also large OpEx costs involved with it. So they're able to make the determination up front, and by winning the people over, and by doing that, they're also winning the city leadership over, which is also key. And that brings me to the second point, is getting concessions on the deployment. So essentially what happens is Google does a feasibility study, and they essentially come to the city officials and say, look, we need you guys to agree to this list of concessions in order for us to come in and deploy the fiber in your area. Well, if you've already won the people over, you've pretty much already won the city constituency over, because they work for the people, right? They're getting the votes. So this model's worked very, very well for them, and they've been able to extract quite lucrative concessions. I'll give you some examples. They are getting faster permitting, zoning, decision-making. They're getting access to right-of-way on telephone poles. They are getting special treatment on the actual deployment of the fiber in the neighborhoods. And there's other examples, too, of concessions that they've been getting. All of these things taken together are providing substantial cost savings when they come and actually deploy the network, and it's speeding up the process. And this is a huge reason why they're able to do this and not lose a lot of money in providing this access. So let's talk a little bit more about why Google Fiber is disruptive. So I've got two charts here. On the left side, we've got the 3 offerings that Google Fiber offers and the price points. So 3 tiers here. The premium package is gigabit internet plus TV. So what you get is 1 gigabit per second internet service, up to 1 gig, plus a TV package. So you get a suite of HDTV channels. Liken it to a cable package, where you're getting, say, 100 or 200 channels. So that service is $120 a month plus taxes and fees, and a one-time construction fee of around $300. Then the second tranche is gigabit internet only, which is $70 a month plus associated fees. And then they offer free internet. So you can get, if the fiber is passing your household, you can actually get free internet service, up to 5 megs per second. That's hugely disruptive, and you can see why on the right side chart, which stacks up Google Fiber's offering against the traditional cable offering. And it's matching it up on price. So essentially what you're getting is you can compare the 1 gigabit per second service against cable offering, which is up to 15 megs, plus the TV packages, which would be comparable. But you're essentially getting almost 100 times faster internet speeds, and you're getting a full suite of HDTV for a price point that is a fraction of the cost than it would be if you were to get a comparable service with cable. So that's hugely disruptive to the traditional incumbent ISP companies. The problem is that Google Fiber is only available in 3 markets currently, but the incumbents, that service is available nationwide. So it's a microcosm right now. It's a very small footprint, but what it means to the broader market and the implications that it can have and is already having on the market is profound. So faced with this, what are the incumbent ISPs going to do? How are they going to respond to this? So we see two paths that they can take. The first path is differentiate what comes through the pipe. And we see this as a viable long-term strategy. Basically, you have service differentiation where you are providing value in other ways, in ways other than purely speed. Now, this we feel is going to help those companies pursuing this strategy to be successful because they are offering the end user more value in the package, but probably not the same level of speed. But this is viable. What's not viable is the second path, which is competing on width of pipe. We see this as a losing strategy long term. Speeding up your own service and eating the cost is just not sustainable. And unfortunately, many ISPs are pursuing this strategy, and they're going to stumble and or not survive. They're going to go bankrupt. It's just not sustainable long term. This strategy incurs huge CapEx costs and leads to margin compression. So what we're seeing now in the market is this dichotomy emerging, this fork in the road where we have some operators pursuing the differentiation path and increasing value coming through the pipe, and we have the other fork in the road is the operators that are saying, okay, well, Google's going to offer X speed, well, we're going to try and match that. Or we're going to keep our current infrastructure and we're going to offer at a lower price point. That's just not sustainable. So let's look at what some of the companies are doing the right thing, following the right path. So we've got here AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast. I'm highlighting these three companies because I feel that they are taking the right steps. They're doing the differentiation path. So the big guys get this. They're already on the move. So I've got their differentiation strategy here. Let's look at AT&T and Verizon first. How are they providing more value through the pipes? So the first thing here we call ubiquitous multi-screen video. So let's imagine for a second that you can consume your video, so it could be live streaming video, any channel that you get in your traditional TV package, that you can watch that video at a high quality of service anywhere, in your house, on the move, in the air, by train, wherever you are in the country, on any screen. That's disruptive. That's something that is a differentiator that the Tier 1 operators can provide that the disruption of Google Fiber cannot provide. And this is something that is very appealing to consumers and that they're willing to pay for, maybe even if they're not getting the same level of speeds or other offerings that Google is providing. So AT&T and Verizon are pursuing the same strategy, but they're going about it different ways. So AT&T is doing it through the DirecTV play. So by purchasing DirecTV, they are getting the satellite, the network of satellites, and they're going to bridge the gap between the satellite infrastructure and AT&T's terrestrial UVerse infrastructure to enable this ecosystem of ubiquitous video. And they can cover the country with this service. Verizon is doing it a little differently. They're not going the satellite route. They are going the cloud route. So what they are doing is using a mix of LTE broadcast, and they're also leveraging the Intel Media assets they acquired last year, which is a cloud platform. It's basically an application that runs over any access line, and it enables you to consume your video anywhere, essentially. So that's how they're going about it. It enables Verizon to do it at very low cost. So it's highly disruptive in that sense. So both of these operators are pursuing this. There's good differentiation opportunities there. Another thing that they're doing is going after the enterprise. So solutions tailored for enterprise. So by leveraging their partner networks, by creating vertical specific applications and solutions, and wrapping in their connectivity services they're able to come to market with end-to-end solutions that are vertically targeted, and this is very appealing to enterprise, and there's good margin here for them. This is another area that they can differentiate that most other competitors cannot match them in this area. So, area of differentiation. Let's look at some of the challenges for AT&T and Verizon. Lots of legacy that AT&T needs to deal with. There's quite a bit of DSL still in their network. They're going to have to upgrade those lines eventually, because for them to provide this ubiquitous video at a high quality of service, they're going to need better pipes on the fixed end to deliver that service. So that's going to, what that means for AT&T is their CapEx levels are going to remain high, and they're going to have to keep spending that money despite them pursuing the differentiation strategy. So things like Gigapower that they're actively pursuing, they actually just came out this morning with news that they're going to extend that to a number of cities now across the United States. That's being driven by their recognition that they need to upgrade parts of their infrastructure so that they can pursue the differentiation, that they can be a player in that. The good news for AT&T is they have deep pockets, and they will be able to fund the necessary CapEx to make this transition, and they're going to be a survivor here, and they're going to thrive in this environment. For Verizon and AT&T, they're not content owners. That's a problem, because content fees, content acquisition costs are steadily rising, and it is one of the highest input costs to delivering video. And this is something that they're both going to have to contend with. Continuing to pass that cost along to the consumer is not a winning, it's not a sustainable strategy, because eventually disruptions in that are going to cause the end users to cut the cord or pursue alternative means of delivering, consuming that video. So, okay, we looked at telecom. Let's look at Comcast, the cable operator here. So they do own content. That's a huge bargaining chip for them. It's something that gives them an economic moat, if you will. So by owning the content, Comcast can manipulate how that content is delivered, and they also have strong negotiation power when other content carriers are going to license that media from Comcast. So they're slightly insulated from those concerns, much different than AT&T and Verizon's position. The other thing Comcast has going for it is its free Wi-Fi initiative. So Comcast is part of this industry partnership called the Cable Wi-Fi Alliance, which is essentially a group of cable operators across the country that have agreed to deploy Wi-Fi infrastructure in public areas and provide ubiquitous access to that network to any of their subscribers that are in the network. There's over 250,000 hotspots in this network spanning the United States, mostly found in major cities. This has been used as a churn reducer because it sweetens the deal. It sweetens the cable package if you're also getting free Wi-Fi out in public areas. But it also now is a differentiator against telecom, because now it's an alternative to cellular. If you have ubiquitous Wi-Fi coverage, then why do you need cellular? Why do you need to buy a data package? This is a differentiator for Comcast and other cable operators, especially because it's free for if you're subscribing to their other services. So what's a challenge for Comcast? Their limited migration options from DOCSIS 3.0. They're already at the peak of how much throughput they can push through their coax infrastructure, and this is a problem for them going forward because they will ultimately need to upgrade that infrastructure, or they're going to have to manage that infrastructure and just keep pushing value through the pipe, which is probably what they're going to do, and it's consistent with some of the other plays they've made in the content and the Wi-Fi areas. Okay, So we looked at some of the operators that are doing the right thing. And then again, there's also operators that are pursuing the other path, which will have its own implications. But if we look at it in aggregate, what's the broadband market going to look like in 5 years in the U.S.? And essentially what we're seeing is a strong response by operators to respond to Google Fiber. So in the markets that Google Fiber has been in, we have seen AT&T, CenturyLink, and others respond with making commitments to upgrade their access lines, provide better speeds, provide discounts for the service that they're offering already. But on a net basis, that is providing, it's spurring more investment, and it is giving more options to the consumers. It's giving them more value in their fiber offerings. So the future holds substantially more fiber in U.S. networks. More fiber will be deployed across the U.S., and it's going to be closer to the end point. So there's going to be quite a bit of copper reclamation. DSL is going to need to be replaced with fiber ultimately. Obviously, operators will pursue this as it is economically feasible. So it might not be feasible to put the fiber right to the premises in all cases, but embedding more fiber in either the core network out to the edge is definitely an area that is going to receive that increased investment. So what is this doing, this chain reaction? So Google Fiber, it's more than just a network, okay? It has much bigger implications than that. It's a movement. It's a model for the future of internet access. It's no longer just a lab experiment and some pipe dream. It is touching off a renaissance in fixed access across the U.S., and the footprint of broadband, of fiber broadband across the U.S. is going to be radically different over the next 5 years, but more so over the next 10 years, 20 years. There's going to be much more fiber in the networks. So that's great. That's great news. This has excellent implications for multiple parties across the U.S. economy. So let's look at them and look at what the implications are going to be. So for Google, this is good. They can have their network, their Google Fiber network, and they're also benefiting from their rivals deploying better infrastructure as well, because it is helping them grow their online advertising business. Consumers are benefiting, not just those subscribing to Google Fiber. They're also benefiting from the incumbents that they're getting service from, because value of their packages is going to be better. We're already seeing this happening in the markets Google Fiber is in, but it's starting to extend out now to other markets. We're seeing it with faster speeds at the same price point. Very good for consumers. More value, more bang for their buck. It frees up more money for them to go and spend in other areas of the economy. Another party that is a big beneficiary of all this is telecom vendors. So this resurgent spend in fixed infrastructure is going to, by Google and the incumbent ISPs, is going to lead to more CapEx spend, and that's going to flow straight into the telecom vendors who are providing the infrastructure and the other services necessary to get this infrastructure in the ground and operational. On a net basis, if you look at it from a macro perspective, the U.S. economy is going to be a big beneficiary of this movement, because faster internet speeds means better productivity, better quality of life, and it's also going to mean more jobs. So if we get more fiber into the system, this has very positive implications for creating sustainable economic growth that can be built from a strong foundation of modern infrastructure. And this is something the U.S. sorely needs. And these things are already set in motion, and it's accelerating. Okay, so before we open it up for Q&A, it is worth noting what else Google is doing Google Fiber is actually part of a much broader initiative at Google. I'm calling it their master plan. So what is that plan? It is to provide universal, low-cost, high-speed access to the internet to the entire world, all of the peoples of the world. And that, it's a pipe dream, right? It's pie in the sky, right? Well, not really. It's actually something that has some credibility. And Google has been investing in internal initiatives to solve that problem. And in these pictures show some of the ideas that they've had and some of the technologies that they're using to do this. So let's start with Project Loon. So Project Loon uses balloons, and it floats them in the stratosphere. And what the idea is to have a network of balloons strategically positioned in the stratosphere that are radio enabled, so they have radio infrastructure affixed to the balloon. And if you see that picture in the top left-hand corner, you see that the balloon is covering that area on the ground, covering a wide location on the ground, basically creating a WAN and covering large tracts of land. So that's one idea. Other ideas that they have is, okay, well, maybe not a balloon. How about satellite? How about drones? What about blimps? So in each of these examples, Google is using the sky to cover large tracts of land. And what they want to do is use these technologies or a mix of these technologies in unison, coordinate them and optimize that so that you can provide that universal low-cost access to the internet. They've been making substantial investments in these areas, and they've also been acquiring companies. That plane you see there, that drone, is from Titan Aerospace. That's a company Google recently acquired. The satellite, Google uses them for their Maps application, but they also are using this, considering using this to provide the access. So there is quite a bit going on at the company to solve this problem. So we really just talked about, Google Fibers really has to do with the United States, but these other initiatives, their master plan, it's really for world domination of providing that access, making sure that everybody gets this access. So in summary, Google is going after they're pushing the incumbent operators to invest in their networks and transform their outdated business models. They want the incumbents to survive. It makes their lives easier, but they want them to be more innovative. They want them to be providing modern services, disruptive services that can create this ecosystem that Google is trying to ultimately create. And remember, this is all about driving their core business. So everything kind of fits together in this big puzzle that is coming together here. Okay, so with that, we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay, great. Thanks for those of you who sent questions through now. Going to get started. The first question, actually, we're going to start with is very specific, and I thought we'll jump in with that. The question was, on this slide, who are the telecom vendors?
Yeah, so anybody who's providing, well, it's really, most telecom vendors will be a beneficiary, maybe not a direct beneficiary, but definitely an indirect beneficiary. The companies that are slated to do the best are those that are actually providing the fiber. So Alcatel-Lucent, Fujitsu, they're coming to mind, but also companies like Ericsson, who's more affixed to, and Nokia Networks, who are more on the wireless end. You know, this is the things that the other operators are doing, like AT&T and Verizon with their ubiquitous video. Those initiatives have implications for the wireless infrastructure as well. So it's really about stimulating investment here and pushing the industry to be more innovative, to be disruptive and to change their business models. So it's going to benefit a broad swath of the telecom vendors.
Next question we have, it's more of a comment. I wanted to get to address that. The comment is Google Fiber available in 3 markets? I thought they said they were still trying to launch service in Austin.
Yep, so there is a pre-planning process when they are coming to do the build. So they have to get the permits, the zoning all in place, part of their, before they even go out and start deploying the fiber. So it's a work in progress. It takes time to deploy this technology, because think about it literally. You have to go out, you have to dig up the ground in many cases, you have to lay the fiber, then you got to dig it up, you got to do that, and then you got to connect every household in that area. Or if you're running it through the telephone poles, I mean, this is time consuming and it takes time. So yes, they're in 3 markets. They have service available in 3 markets. In Austin, I don't think they're actually selling the service yet, but they are very close. They have broken ground, and they are building out the infrastructure. But it does take time to do this.
So you kind of addressed this, Chris, but you might want to go into deeper detail on this one. The question was, I'd be interested if there are any plans yet to expand to Europe. I have heard Google has started purchasing dark fiber in Europe.
Potentially. So Europe's a little bit trickier. There's a lot of regulation in Europe. They're probably, are they considering it? Probably. They probably are, because again, it would be in line with their master plan, quote unquote, which is to cover the world with access. But I'm sure they're going to be encountering more challenges than they are in the United States to do something like this. It remains to be seen how the governments are going to respond to them doing that.
Okay. The next question we have is, Google has a history of using OEMs and component vendors to lower the cost of data center equipment. Will they or other carriers try to do the same thing in the access equipment to lower the total CapEx?
Yes, and they are doing this to some extent. On the set-top boxes that they're putting out and the fiber jacks that they're affixing to the households, they're employing that strategy for those items. And yes, it is helping them get some cost efficiencies. It's also helping them build these items to their specs, and it's giving them more control over not only the costs, but also how they are how they're able to provide the service.
Okay. Next question we have is this a ploy or is the Google commitment real? Google did the same thing 4 years ago with Wi-Fi. They then talk about Project Loon for internet access to rural areas. 6BB is a low-margin biz, so will they seriously expand or announce just to threaten and spur telcos?
Right. So let's come back to the nuclear reaction metaphor. So they are the catalyst here that is setting off a chain reaction in investment in not only fixed access, but also, this is spreading now. So yes, there's only up to 12 metro areas that they're going to deploy this to. They're putting a substantial amount of money behind this initiative. I mean, we're talking on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. They probably have already spent well over $1 billion on this initiative thus far. So this is not chump change, and they have indicated that they are willing to take this to the next level. And that indicator is when they came out and said, we're going to do this in up to 9 more metro areas. They're probably not going to stop there. And so yes, I think this is going to be have quite a big impact.
Okay. The next question we have, and for those of you who've sent questions through, we do have several, so we will get to all of your questions. The next question, Chris, what is the tipping point for Google Fiber for an uptake rate when evaluating fiber hoods?
Yeah, so they're looking at, so when they come into the market, they're looking, they need to sign up a certain amount of people to meet quota in order for it to be economically feasible. Now, that tipping point that you're referring to, that differs by neighborhood, actually, because some neighborhoods might have different topography. They might have different, some might have more multi-dwelling units where it's more economically feasible than if there are households that are very spread out. So it really is on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis, maybe even a street-by-street basis, that they're considering doing this. So it's very difficult to pinpoint an exact number. But they are looking to meet quota. I'm pretty sure they're doing it on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis. So if they get enough people for that neighborhood, then they commit to doing the deployment, and then they actually go and start making the truck rolls and starting to put the fiber in place.
This is more of an opinion question, Chris. Facebook is following a similar initiative to provide global access to the Internet with its Internet.org initiative. If they are both primarily seeking more ad dollars, why not partner together on the infrastructure part of the equation?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would not be surprised to see them partner on some big initiative. Facebook has also been involved in similar things. I mean, they've been tinkering with solutions to the problem, but they're not at the level that Google has. They're not as involved as Google has been. But yes, you know, Facebook, there's other companies that would benefit from this as well. So there could be, it's completely conceivable, that you would have these web-scale companies coming together and, you know, putting some big project into motion.
Okay, the next question. What is the estimated cost per home connected with Google Fiber?
So again, that depends on the topography and then some of the other dynamics, but I think on average, from the pole to the house plus the setup fees, I'd say it's around, so they're getting part of the construction cost defrayed by the subscriber. They're paying a portion of it, but all in, I'd say it's between, you know, $800 to $1,200 on average, maybe probably a little higher than that. I mean, it's going to be less expensive for a multi-dwelling unit than it is for a residential household. So it really depends.
Okay. We have many more questions in queue. There's been several requests for the slides, so just want to let everybody know who's still online. We will be sending the slides out tomorrow, so just keep an eye on your mailboxes for that. The next question we have, Chris, is, does this have any impact besides faster speeds, more access to competitive cloud platforms like Bing, Facebook, Baidu, Yahoo, etc.?
Jonathan, can you repeat that question?
So the question came in, does this have any impact besides faster speeds, more access to competitive cloud platforms like Bing, Facebook, Yahoo, etc.? Maybe that wasn't a full question.
So the impact, yeah, the impact is much broader than just providing the access. It benefits web scale companies, and they're, you know, having the faster speed enables them to monetize the ads more frequently, and that model is going to be enjoyed by multiple companies beyond even Google in this area. So it's a broad movement, not just helping Google, it's helping a broad swath of the industry here.
Okay. We have 2 more questions in queue, so if anyone has any additional questions, send them through now. The next question is, given that it takes 3 to 5 years to deploy fiber in a 500,000 HH metro area, G-Fiber needs to get moving. Do you expect an announcement later this year identifying additional markets?
So, okay, so yes, it does take time to do this, and this comes back to the previous earlier question we had. It does take several years to deploy a fairly large-scale fiber network. I do want to note that before Google goes out and actually does this, they already have the feasibility tests done, and they already have agreements with all of the stakeholders involved so utility companies, public infrastructure constituents, to do this as fast as possible and as low cost as possible. So they are getting some time efficiency there. What was the second part of the question? Oh, announcement. So the 9 additional metro markets, they haven't actually made the determination which of the 9 is going to get the service. The feasibility tests have been completed, and all 9 metro areas said yes, they want it. So now the process is Google actually determining what's their CapEx commitment going to be, given the feasibility studies that they conducted, and making sure that all the parties that need to be involved in this project are all in line. I would expect in the next few months for them to announce which of the 9 cities is going to actually get the fiber. Will there be additional markets outside of the first 12? I would think yes. I think they are going to continue pursuing this. If you look at the progression, when they started in 2012 with Kansas City, they were doing 1 city a year, and then all of a sudden they said, all right, we're going to do this to 9 cities. That's a big step forward in terms of coverage. I am sure there are other cities that are going to meet their feasibility studies, and I know for a fact that there's a lot of cities out there that want Google Fiber, way beyond the original 12 that were announced. So, I mean, we could even potentially see instances where municipalities are actually partially funding some of these projects because they want the infrastructure so badly, because it's so good for their economy. So, you know, could see some different models emerge in coming years where it will accelerate this deployment.
Okay. With the second question we had in queue, actually, Chris, you just answered that. So the last question we have right now is, what is your thought on Bell Labs' recent lab test of gigabit over copper?
Yeah, so I'm actually just seeing that for the first time, but I do know that there have been DSL life extension technologies, so vectoring, phantom mode, bonding, whatever it is, that helps put more faster speeds through the DSL pipes. Yeah, that's great, but it will definitely help operators to provide, you know, services that are competitive. But again, you know, maintaining copper, operating the copper it's more expensive than operating a fiber network. The fiber is really expensive is in the upfront CapEx cost. So long term, it makes more sense to just rip and replace it with the fiber than it does to keep upgrading the copper. Now again, that's going to depend on a market-by-market basis. Is it economical or not? And maybe depending on some of the demographics of that market, and some of these other issues that you need to deal with in order to put out net new infrastructure in the ground or on the poles. So it remains to be seen.
Okay, great. So we had some additional comments, not questions in queue. So for those of you who had comments for Chris, I will share them with him, and he'll reach out to you on those comments. As I mentioned, I was going to share with you all of the social media links in the presentation. So I do encourage you to follow Chris as well as TBR on the Twitter handles listed here, and join the conversations on SlideShare and YouTube. And if you feel inclined, we don't have it on here, but you can reach out to Chris and connect with him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, guys, feel free to reach out.
Right. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to him in that way. As you are leaving the webinar, there are a few things. So brief survey with 3 questions. How good was the webinar? How valuable was the webinar? How good was the presenter? And if there's any other additional and open-ended comments or questions in terms of coverage that you'd like to share with us, we do value this feedback very much. We are using it to improve our webinars from quarter to quarter. We do realize your time is valuable and want to make sure that we are bringing you the information that you need to help your jobs, do your jobs better. So if there is actual feedback, please do send that through at this time. I'm going to leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes in case there's any last-minute requests for follow-ups with Chris. if like I said, a conversation. And if not, we will be doing additional webinars in telecom space over the next next quarter. We'll be sending out that invitation list or the press release with the webinars, upcoming webinars in the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye out for that email as well as the deck will be coming tomorrow, along with the recording link that you can pass along to other people in your organization if you'd like to share this presentation with them. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you everyone for your time today, and we look forward to supporting you going forward. Have a great afternoon.